I don't know if you guys know this or not. Doriani Institutes are selling for 0.75 to 1 div each right now. 0.75 to 1 div each. Locus of Corruption, these are selling for 2 div each. If you get both Locus and Doriani on a Chronicle, they sell for 2.5 div each. At the start of the league when I was doing these, they were only like 30C each, which means that we can capitalize on it, and Alva becomes a very viable strategy for both low budget players who want to run it as a solo mapping strategy, and then for more like medium budget players who want to run it as like a secondary or tertiary mapping strategy. And you can do this with an incredibly low currency investment cost as well as Atlas point investment cost to gain a pretty substantial reward. So how the temple normally works is at the start of each temple, you will have 12 incursions. You will see 3 incursions per map, and each incursion essentially allows you to change the room or upgrade it by a tier or 2. After you complete all 12 incursions, you will then be able to either run the temple itself or take it out and sell it to someone else. We will be focusing on like the sell it to someone else aspect, but that is kind of tedious, having to run essentially 4 maps of 3 incursions each in order to sell 1 temple. Instead, by using the scarab of the timelines, we are able to increase the odds of getting sellable temples pretty significantly. At the end of your last incursion for every map, it will essentially take a snapshot of how your temple looks at that moment, and then randomize the tier of each room, and then drop a chronicle with those random numbers on the ground. That means so long as we have any tier of the corruption room or the gem cutter room connected to the entrance, we will have a 1 in 3 chance of dropping a chronicle with the tier 3 variant of that room on the ground, which makes our strategy going into maps incredibly straightforward. All we then do is we just run any map. In this case, I'm using dunes because I think it's the best layout. They're white, they don't need to be upgraded at all. You can if you want to, but they really don't need to. And then we just hop around the map looking for Alva, all right? If we find her, what we want to then do now is just look at the rooms. If it has corruption or gem cutter, we want to clear that architect. And if it doesn't, we just kill the one on the top right. We do this because clearing the one on the top right almost always upgrades the room. If you upgrade the room to tier 3, then you will never see that architect again. And that essentially removes him from the pool and increases the likelihood that you'll see one of the architects that you actually care about. And we just go through the map, go through all the Alvas, and we're essentially just fishing for the 2 architects that we actually care about. And as a result, the 2 rooms we care about. It takes me like on average like a little over a minute to clear a map, which means I was clearing around 50 maps in an hour. And you just want to come in here, clear the portal, and then just jump out. It's just that simple. The only time you have to do anything different is if you actually find a room that you want to keep, because you need to connect that to the entrance, and in which case you'll have to spend a little bit of time like making sure that the room is connectable to the entrance or connecting rooms. Otherwise, you just go through the map, jump in, kill the architect, jump out. So like this one right here, this is the corruption chamber, okay? But the only thing we actually have to do here is this room isn't actually connected to the entrance at all. So there's no way to get there. So all we need to do is clear this corruption room and then come down here and connect this to the temple defense. So one thing, and this is incredibly important, is that these rooms are static. So if I exit out of here and I jump into a new map, that layout will not change ever. When you're running maps normally, you're not using the scarab of the timelines. There's just no need to, because we don't actually want any of the chronicles from those temples until they have one of the rooms. But when you see a room that you do want, like in that case, that was the corruption room, then you can just start a new map with the timelines in them, and you are guaranteed the next Alva zone that you see will be the one with the corruption chamber that we just saw in them. So if you look here, sacrifice chamber, and up here, corruption chamber. It's the same exact layout, same exact connections. All we have to do is clear the corruption chamber and then connect to the bottom right room. Out. And then look, this third one is the last one. It drops a chronicle. And look, you can see here, the corruption chamber is tier 1 still, but that is a 1 in 3 roll. From now on, every final incursion will guarantee drop a chronicle with randomized numbers of rolls. We can go back to the base, I can show you. Although the corruption chamber didn't change, if you look, the other rolls all did. Everything else is either tier 1 or tier 2. But as you can see, we have a tier 3 toxic grove here because the actual tiers are completely randomized. But we got a little unlucky on this temple. We really didn't get anything good. This is definitely not the standard for what you're going to expect. This will probably happen one like every 4 temples. Let me run one more and see if we can get something better. The first map, I got Doriani's Institute. Second map, I got another Doriani's Institute. The third map, I got nothing. And then the actual temple map that I took away from, I have both Doriani's and Locus of Corruption. This was probably above average rolls on the temple. This one was below average rolls. And that kind of like brings the question of like, what is the actual average value of the returns for the temples per map that you're doing or per hour? Essentially the profitability of this method. I did a pool of only 50 of these, so there's quite a bit of variance, but the person who actually introduced me to this method, he has done hundreds of these methods. He actually tracked the amount of profit he made per map, and it was looking like 0.6 div per map. That was actually before the prices went up to as high as they are now. So it's even more than that. But that was kind of in line with my experience over like my 50 maps doing this. This is kind of like the profitability of if you're running Alva as your primary money-making method, but the actual best way to run this is like as your secondary or tertiary strategy on your Atlas. And that's simply because if you saw when I was clearing these maps, if it took me like a minute and 10 seconds to run the map, like 50 seconds of that minute and 10 seconds was me actually like looking for the incursions. And the other 20 seconds was me actually just like clearing the incursions themselves. So if you're running another strategy that's also clearing the map, and then you just so happen to just do the incursion every time you see it, then your total time spent doing incursions goes down from like a minute and 10 seconds per map to like 20 seconds, but the reward is still the same 0.6 div. It's pretty broken, and it's very similar to how a lot of people run heist caches on their maps. Okay, so that's the upside, right? Around 0.6 div per map, but what is the downside? How much does it actually cost to get this thing running? It costs pretty much nothing, okay? If you look here, I was able to buy 25 of these Scarab timelines for 215C. That's around 8.6C per Scarab, or roughly 1 div for 25 Scarabs. You only use the Scarabs when you have a temple with a good room in it, so you're not going to actually be using them every single map. As a result, that means you're only going to need 3 Scarabs per like actual Chronicle drop that will have a tier 3 room in it. That means that every 1 div that you buy will drop you around 8 Chronicles, which are at least 1 div each. In other words, it costs pretty much nothing. And the last thing is the Atlas tree. What is the actual point investment looking like here? This is just a janky ass tree I've been using to progress through Atlas. Close your eyes for some of this stuff. There's 5 wheels that you can take. The only valuable passive points that we really care about are the nodes that give you plus percentage chance to contain Alva. This 3-point wheel here is the biggest bang for your buck, and you could theoretically just second this and be okay. It gives you 10%, 20%, 10%. So 40% total on 3 points, or essentially 4 points of investment if you come down here. The minimum requirement that you need for doing this as like a secondary or tertiary strategy. If you're going to just go all in on this strategy, you're a budget character, whatever, and you just want to build up your first 10, 20 div, which is how I started the league, or how I have been doing it for my challenge. I didn't just start the league now. You're going to want to tech into all 5 of these Alva wheels. The thing is, though, is that you don't actually need to get the end notables here. The end points for the wheels are actually trash, or like they don't really do anything for our method. All you care about, again, is the plus percentage, and you just want to get up to or as close to 100% as you can. I had this tree set up with like 40 Atlas points. It's very, very low investment, even at the highest amount of investment you can do. But if you're going to want to run this as like a secondary or tertiary strat, which I highly recommend, you need to get this wheel here, 40% chance for Alva, and then as many +8s as you can get without being too inconvenient. If you have 4 extra points that you're willing to spare, it's totally acceptable just to only put these 4 points into Alva. It's not going to be as efficient in terms of like you're not going to be making as much profit from Alva, but Alva is a situation where like you don't actually need to do that much for her. Once you get the acceptable tower, then you can start using Scarabs. If you put only 4 points in here, you'll see her once pretty much every other map, and that is perfectly fine. The Scarabs are incredibly cheap, as we've already discussed. You get as many plus Alva points as you possibly can. I would say this is your biggest priority wheel. All the other wheels are +8 at most, so those all have equal priority, whichever is closest in the tree. There's one right here, which is 24%, which is like right down the middle where a lot of people will go. This wheel is an interesting one. This is probably like the lowest priority wheel that you have. The only point in this wheel is to give you higher chances of upgrading your rooms. You're not searching for that tier 3 corruption room or tier 3 gem coders room. You're really just hoping that you win the 1 and 3 on the Scarabs. It is kind of a nice to have, because when you do upgrade any room to tier 3, which this helps a lot doing that, you remove those architects from the pool, so you have a higher likelihood of hitting the 2 rooms and the 2 architects that you actually do want to hit. But yeah, that's pretty much it. The Atlas is incredibly straightforward. It's incredibly low investment in terms of what you're actually putting in the Atlas, what you're putting in terms of currency. I really hope this was helpful. I hope that this strategy will help you guys kind of get to the next level in terms of like the amount of gear that you need. It definitely helped me a lot. I was giga hard stuck on my leveling build, econk, and I was doing ZDPS everything. Couldn't kill like tier 1 map yellow beast. It was a fucking disaster. And this strategy is what helped me get my first 15 div in a couple hours. It skyrocketed me to now where I can start farming higher level strategies. I'll probably post a video on my strategy tomorrow I'm guessing the strategy that I use tomorrow will be like a 25 to 30 div strategy, doing a combination of Alva, Beasts, and Heist. But I will follow up with that tomorrow. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys like the video, please like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. Best of luck. I hope you guys make a fuck ton of div off of this strategy. Goodbye.